It's one of the things that clearly occurs to me is just a clash of worldviews at its most fundamental level. On one side, people that believe that there's a creator who revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ and has shown people how they're to live their lives. And America began as an experiment in Christian liberty, that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were all, for the most part, written by Christian men, and that far and away the most citations and all the early foundational documents that led up to the Declaration of Independence, something like 70% of them were right from Scripture. And yet didn't want to impose a state church like they had in England, so they were very careful to say we're not going to have a state church, but all the power was vested in the states, and many of the state constitutions had oaths of office that were Trinitarian, and you couldn't even hold office if you weren't, essentially had the qualities of an elder or a deacon in your church. Yeah. And now we're where we are now, is to come to our nation's capital and try to impose on this culture some worldview that you've extrapolated from a book, a myth. If you want to believe it's true, knock yourself out. Raise your family. Go back to North Carolina and raise your family anyway. But don't you dare come to our nation's capital and try to tell us that your revelation of God needs to be imposed on us by law. Tell us that we can't have abortions if we don't want to have abortions, or tell us that I can't marry my boyfriend if I want to marry my boyfriend. Get your freaking religion out of my life.
Something I have to think about that quick with responses.
I would say in response to that our nation was actually founded on Christian principles. Many of the founders themselves were Christians, and our nation was founded on the principle of self-government. And one of the problems with self-government is you have to have a moral people with a moral conscience, or they won't govern themselves. And our founding fathers also said that you can't really have authentic morality without religion. So a country without a religion trying to do away with Christianity not only forsakes our heritage, not only abandons where we come from, but you also cannot have self-government without religion, is what I would think.
Well, there's a daughter. How old are you?
21.
That's awesome. So you homeschooled?
Yes.
Yeah. Good job. Okay.
Because it's just wrong, in nature, and what just, it's just wrong, and not just, God says it's wrong. He brought destruction on cities and all, and has brought judgment on cultures because of it. It tears at the fiber of the family, which is important.
What would you say to people who, I've talked to many of them, who would say, look, I had lunch with a Methodist minister about 3 weeks ago, who says sex outside of marriage is wrong. I believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, physical death, bodily resurrection of Jesus, ascension to the right hand of the Father, no salvation in any other name but His. I believe that sex is to be only enjoyed in the context of a covenantal relationship, marriage. But I'm married to a man. He went up to Canada, got married to his boyfriend. And why in the world would you deny me the right to sanctify my relationship with this man through the covenant of marriage? I mean, aren't you imposing on somebody a particular religious worldview in violation of the First Amendment?
One thing I would say was I guess some people have homosexual feelings or lesbian feelings. I don't, and I'm glad of it, because if you did have those feelings, it would be very bad. And so I think some people genuinely have those feelings.
And that's actually, I've talked to them, that's all they've ever known. I mean, they didn't choose in some type of conscious way, well, I like women, but I'm going to decide to like men. From their earliest sexual awakenings, they were attracted to the same sex. That's all they have ever known. What would you say to people that are genuinely feel this is how God made me?
Well, as a Christian that believes that the Bible is true, the Bible calls it an abomination. But many people do ask why the Bible will call that an abomination, but only say fornication is wrong, but it seems to make a huge deal out of homosexuality. I think it's probably because marriage is not about sexual preference in the Bible. Jesus is very clear on the fact, he discusses it, that the institute of marriage is meant to portray something great, something much bigger than ourselves. It's meant to portray the relationship between God and Christ and between Christ and the church. And because it's supposed to be like a living testimony or a living witness or a living example to the world of what that spiritual relationship looks like, when you mess with it because of sexual preferences, it doesn't portray that. It corrupts it and it perverts it.